Welcome to episode 2 of Leadership Lens, our engaging and innovative vlog series that delves into the dynamic world of diversity and inclusion, featuring insights from leaders shaping the future across various public sectors. I'm Jade Beckles, the Diversity and Inclusion Advisor here at GS, and this episode features Kulvinder McDonald, a trailblazer in nuclear safety and diversity. Kulvinder is a fellow of the Institution of Chemical Engineers with over 30 years in the nuclear industry, starting her career managing defence sector radioactive waste facilities. Kulvinder later became a superintending inspector of nuclear installations at the Office for Nuclear Regulation. Known for her regulatory leadership across high hazard sites like Sellafield and the Atomic Weapons Establishment, Kulvinder has significantly advanced nuclear safety and regulatory practices both domestically and internationally. Proudly, she's played a pivotal role in improving diversity and inclusion within the nuclear sector, championing innovative initiatives and fostering equitable work environments. So welcome, Kulvinder, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Jade, for inviting me. And
No
thank you for the
problem.
very kind introduction.
I'm just really excited to hear your insights into leadership, especially as a senior woman of colour in the nuclear industry. So, I mean, there've been a number of impactful senior women leaders in nuclear, of course, yourself being one of them, along others in ONR like Adrian Kelby, CBE, and Dr. Mina Gulshan, CBE, for example. Could you share how you navigated the complexities of rising to senior leadership in the nuclear industry, especially where the workforce is only 22% female, and perhaps highlight any key achievements or projects during your tenure that advanced D&I within the industry?
Thanks, Jade. So firstly, nuclear sector is a really exciting sector to be part of at the minute, with a lot of wide-ranging opportunities available. To my mind, nuclear is also a very small, highly regulated industry where actually staff move between the sector. Scientists and engineers move between the sector, but rarely, in my experience, does that movement include outside the sector. So, in fact, the nuclear sector, in my opinion, is actually quite a non-diverse sector.
Yeah.
And you've already noted that the workforce is 22% female. And it's also true that there's a nuclear sector deal, which is looking at a target of 40% female by 2030. But I would also say that there's actually something that's partly missing. There are things such as race and other protected characteristics and intersectionality matters that haven't really been dealt with, I think, properly. For example, when I joined the Office for Nuclear Regulation, or NII as it was, back in 1995, I was only one of a handful of women in the whole organisation and the only woman of colour. When I left the organisation in 2023, in my understanding is there was still only one handful of women of colour within a workforce of over 300. And actually the people of colour in total, I would say would be less than 20. So typically 4% of the workforce within the regulator were of colour and about 1.5%, 2% of women of colour. So when I was there, I was actually the organisation I was working with was predominantly white male. The industry I was regulating and all the meetings I attended and the teams I led were predominantly white male. So I just put that into the context of where we're at. So in terms of navigation, I think the key values for me were really versatility. I did 12 different roles in my time in ONR, and each of them were very different. So every 3 years or less, you were back on the bottom of the learning curve, learning and doing a new role right across the industry, across assessment, across inspection, across strategy, cross delivery, managing different teams. And what I actually found is every time I started a new role, I was having to prove myself again and again and again and again, which actually wasn't true. I found as I looked deeper to other colleagues. So you were just always having to like prove yourself.
Yeah.
And other things that helped me was phenomenal work ethic. I've been brought up to like work and work and work. So I just did that anyway. The determination, to keep going when things aren't going great. The role, the actual real interest of the public sector role, the public service and the interesting roles. They're very interesting roles and it can keep your mind going. And most importantly for me, was resilience. When things are not going great, when you're feeling on your own, that you've got to just be really strong. And how did I use those to navigate my career? I remained the authentic me throughout. So although there was pressure to change your behaviors to fit in, become kind of part of that cultural norm, which is a bit,
Mm.
I can't really maybe articulate this perfectly, but it's like kind of like a male environment where, when you go in, you're kind of like maybe talked over or not recognized unless you talk louder and louder and louder.
Yeah.
And I just was not prepared to be that louder and louder and louder. I became proactive in identifying my own opportunities and actually doing those jobs in such a strong style and being really, really good at what I did. So the hard work and self-belief actually, kind of got me through. So people couldn't ignore the kind of work that I was doing and delivering. I had a small support network of family, friends, and trusted colleagues. And almost by accident, I stumbled upon a Black female coach who helped me come to terms with issues at play within the environment that I was working in and actually helped develop coping and growth strategies. So that really,
Mm.
really helped me because initially I was oblivious. I just thought, I'm just going to do my work harder, deliver, 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 until I actually saw some of these complexities of things at play because it's like a bit of a club, as we all would do, we gravitate to people like us. And if there's nobody like us, then you're kind of almost
Lost.
isolated, lost. In fact, that's what I said to my coach the first time I met her was, I'm so lost. Can you help? And actually that was pivotal in helping me really, get on with it. So those are kind of my navigations, how I got through, keep going. And then you asked the question of the diversity achievements. So what I did in my role, for example, as superintending inspector, professional lead for over 100 site inspectors, again, predominantly white male, is I mainstreamed diversity and inclusion. I created diverse and inclusive teams, and that just doesn't mean different characteristics, protected characteristics, just different ways of thinking.
Yeah.
Different, like someone might be a completer finisher, someone's creative. So making sure that, the different skill sets, behavioral patterns involving administrators and technical staff. And that actually resulted in actually outstanding project delivery. And I would cite, ONR's investigation capability, which went from, not the best to really on a par with all other regulators. And UK-wide safety performance indicators, these are two projects that I'm really proud of. And then innovatively allocating, developing and creating processes which allocated individuals to roles to ensure their development and organizational benefits in a way that was totally fair and equitable based on, very transparent guidelines. Um, Moving on, I became an integral part of ONR's diversity and inclusion group, leading on the strategy development and its implementation. So that's awareness, reverse mentoring, the Black Allies program, mandatory all staff training, and focusing on some targets for increasing representation. Because when that representation's better, then you reach a critical mass at which things start becoming more equitable. Following on from the George Floyd incident in 2020, I made an organizational vlog, which actually was the introduction was by Adrian Kelby, who you mentioned at the outset. And that had, I think, a major impact on the organization because people had to really face these issues. I mentored my senior manager peers because when you're at a position of power and influence, you can influence those around your table. And that included the director, members of ONR's top team, including the chief nuclear inspector and the CEO, who at that time was separate. And I was part of the reverse mentoring program. So although we were not at so different levels, I was actually taking someone through what was, I felt in my life, in my career, my lived experiences. And then as a regulator, I sat at the top table with, directors of companies. So, again, you're influencing, as you go around, the fact that you're telling people about ethnic issues, about women issues, you're talking about it openly. And my final thing was just being there as me, the authentic me. I think that gives hope underrepresented groups because you think if I can see it, I can be it.
One of our consultants here at GS, they said in one of our videos, you can't be what you can't see. And it's a phrase that we use quite a lot in GS at the moment. Absolutely.
Yeah, and actually to be there, to be doing your job, and to be one of the best, because sometimes, you do have targets and people maybe put the wrong people in those roles, so they don't have that respect. But when you've proven yourself at virtually every single role within your organization and you've delivered, then you gain that certain respect. And when you've regulated all parts of the industry, then again, I would say you have a certain street cred.
Yeah.
And I think having that street cred, being there and leading and being fair and being authentic, I think I did my best.
Absolutely. It sounds like, trailblazing. I said it before, and you know what is really inspiring for me, Kulvinder, is that I resonated so much when you were talking about having to work harder than perhaps some of your colleagues, or in a way that you have to prove yourself constantly, and needing that resilience and that hard work ethic, and finding coping skills to deal with this sort of isolation, and you said that will to just keep going. But what you weren't talking about, which is the inspiring part for me, was like put up and shut up, because you're there advocating and doing all these amazing initiatives, and really sort of trailblazing D&I and fairness and equity within nuclear, which is so inspiring to me. Absolutely.
Thanks, Jade. And it's really it's a key part of my core belief. Fairness and equitability. It's one of my the things I deeply believe in.
It's plain to see that intersectional experience, and how that has sort of underscored your versatility and ability to lead in diverse environments with very unique demands, and that skill set undoubtedly supported you in navigating both the defence and civil nuclear sectors. So, having worked in both civil and defence nuclear, did you notice any distinct differences in their approaches to D&I?
You know what, Jade? This thought has crossed my mind, and I think all parts of the nuclear industry are aware of the business and moral benefits of having a diverse workforce, and they all have strategies and policies to try and achieve it. And there are things, like flexible working, like getting to different career pools. And the civil sector, in my opinion, seems to be further ahead in terms of articulating D&I and what it's doing. I would, however, note that, at the top tables, there's very little representation of women or ethnic minorities at all. So, quite often it's told that, we're recruiting from the bottom. So it's going to take time. I've just told you in 30 years, there's not been much movement, certainly in women of colour, or actually, any people of colour. So they seem concentrated at the lower levels. And so, something maybe is missing. So there's two tiers. So I think, we do have very deep cultural norms. In the defence sector, they become more overt. I think you do get more overt showing, but I think in both sides, I think it's pretty the same. I would say, to be fair, although there is that more greatly, there's the greater overtness in the defence sector of the command and control structure.
Yeah.
And also, actually, what the other thought that crosses my mind is that in the recruitment and in D&I policies, they are written in the whole, but certainly in my experience, by HR professionals and administrators. And what would really be helpful is if engineers and scientists were part of that process within that organization, because it tends to be a bit fragmented. Do you get the HR professionals going out and doing writing the policies, and different people implementing them? But back to your original question, I believe that both defence and civil are not too far different, although that articulation is probably more clear and more ahead in the civil sector.
Fantastic. And you were talking before about the lack of diversity, and you mentioned it there as well within the nuclear sector. And actually, you see the benefits and the effectiveness and the innovation when you do bring diversity into project delivery and that type of thing. And it's really important, isn't it? Because I wanted to discuss the barriers in attracting diverse talent pipeline, specifically into nuclear. And as you'll know, nuclear plants are typically located in rural areas, which generally have less diverse populations. And I'd say recently there's been a nuclear renaissance in the nuclear industry due to the advancements in fission and fusion technology, which is quite promising. But as you said, for many years, there has been a lack of investment, especially in nuclear development, which has led to fewer job opportunities and generally a negative perception of the nuclear sector. I'd say until its importance for achieving net zero emissions and enhancing energy security has been recognised. And you mentioned them before, organisations like Women in Nuclear and Race Equality in Nuclear, the National Skills Delivery Group and the NDA are actively working to enhance diversity within the nuclear sector, alongside yourself. But Kulvinder, what do you believe are the primary barriers to attracting diverse talent into nuclear fields, and what innovation in recruitment strategies can make nuclear specialisation more appealing to a wider array of candidates?
Yeah. So that's quite an interesting question, but right to the beginning of what you said, having experienced, what it's like to work in a diverse team and a non-diverse team, when you've got a diverse team, sparks fly, literally, it's greater than the sum of the parts, and you think, wow, what have we just done? And it's because of that diversity of thought. And in terms of potential barriers, well, you've mentioned the rural locations and all this work that lots of organisations are doing, and there's limited more things that you can come up with. In terms of some of the barriers, I think, are cultural norms in certain societies. For example, you may never have thought of doing nuclear. For example, in my society, when I was brought up, you're going to be a lawyer or a doctor or a dentist or a teacher. So these are the kind of careers that you kind of like brought to think about. So again, I would say we need to reach out to these people who are actually very clever, but who choosing to go in different paths. I think there's more attractive training and work packages because nuclear is so kind of like specialized. So you may need greater, better training and work packages. I think the other thing is enhancing the public perception of nuclear using social media, but be honest about it. Because what you've said, right, quite honestly, is that there is a renaissance. There's new build coming up. There's research and development opportunities, but there is also a big legacy.
Yeah.
There's the waste and decommissioning legacy for us all to deal with. There is the geological disposal facility that's many years too late, later than was originally envisaged. So if we're actually honest about what's good, what's not so good, and how we can collectively fix it or work on it, I think that would help. I also think the use of targets. There are targets for women in nuclear going forward, but maybe more targets, which is, I'm not an absolute fan of targets, but I think we do need a critical mass of good people. And the other thing that crossed my mind was that younger people now, I mean, including my own daughters, they're not really thinking of a job for life. So one thing would be having greater partnerships with other major hazard industries.
Wow.
As for example, in my career, part of the opportunities I sought out was working in the major hazardous chemical sector. So I regulated the coma when coma came in. And that gave me a complete new perspective. So if you're now recruiting from graduates, you're doing apprenticeships, if we had partnerships with other major hazard industries where people would have that greater variety of experience and a greater flow, because the difference between a coma safety report and a nuclear safety case, there are great parallels. And you're talking about catastrophic events if things go wrong. Okay, with nuclear, it's a lot worse, but Texas City showed us that
It's that risk management, isn't it?
it's a risk management. It's a similar thinking. So if we could have some partnership, I think that would be great. And what I'm finding as part of my work with the Institute of Chemical Engineers, there seem to be a lot more diverse candidates applying for chartership of the ICHEME that are in the nuclear sector.
And I think that goes for, the upcoming talent pipeline, but also existing senior leadership as well, because when you were saying before about how these roles are typically shared within the sector, but actually if we can look out of the sector to, like you say, other major hazard industries, that's potentially how we can get more diversity within the is that a possibility for senior leadership though, looking outside of nuclear sector? And
I think it totally is, and particularly if we do flow both ways. If you, and particularly, for senior managers, yes, definitely. And in the health and safety executive, we used to have movement a lot more than we have at the moment.
Yeah.
So 100%. And I think the other thing actually, Jade, on this is that if you do get this movement, it makes it, in my opinion, a lot more exciting to people coming in. So if I tell you you're going to be in nuclear and you're like in your early 20s, but your entire career, nuclear may come, it may go. I mean, I don't know what the next 30, 40 years are looking like. But if you can say, we offer you that diversity of nuclear and chemical, and that's a much more exciting project or prospect for those coming into the industry at the very start of their careers. And then they may have really interesting career path and may choose not to leave it.
Absolutely. And so yeah, I mean, attracting diverse talent it's so important, is it? It's crucial, in fact. But I'd say equally important is how we support and include this talent once they're on board. And so often, diversity inclusion are grouped together and seen as one single objective or strategy, when actually it's two very distinct, but both critically important components for a truly inclusive culture. And it's perhaps a leading question, Kulvinder, but how important is it that public sector leaders ensure new diverse talent feels truly included during their onboarding, and that their inclusivity efforts extend beyond recruitment to foster that genuinely inclusive workplace culture?
Do you know what, Jade? Out of everything that we've discussed, this is probably something that I feel most strongly about. I think recruitment is great, but the inclusivity part is the most fundamental part that we can do. And I heard a quote some time ago where it's about diversity being invited to the party and inclusivity being invited to dance. And actually, I think it's it's absolutely fundamental. And I think some of the barriers to that are the cultures we already have that we've drawn from a particular industry, they're a particular demographic. So we need to make sure that not only the new recruits feel included and set the culture right, they're going to be mentored by people who have been there for some time, who have to also be in the zone, for want of a better word, kind of like want to, feel that inclusivity is important, feel that everybody's opinion should be heard, because that's where I found that there have been or can be issues where people come in with all these wonderful, bright ideas and they're not listened to. So they stop giving these bright ideas, they stop contributing to meetings, and you've lost your spark. Those
Yeah,
people become part of a culture because they see what gets them progressing, and that culture continues. So to change it, we have to make sure that everybody from top to the bottom of an organization feels wanted, feels included, feels valued for their authentic selves. And that in particular is that when new people come in, they don't form part of an old culture, but they
yeah,
have the opportunity to make it there is as much their organization as anybody else's, and they have the right to be heard. As leaders, we make decisions. We can't take on board everybody's ideas at all. But what we can always do, and this is what my teams have always said to me, is you don't always do what I say, but you always listen and give me the rationale. And that's as leaders, I think that to me is inclusion. We listen, we weigh up the pros and cons, all the information we have, and we make the right decision. And if we don't take on board what someone said, then we've heard and we've explained why not. So, I go back to representation and making sure that everybody is wanted. And
yeah.
then when they do, there'll be a domino effect for future recruitment by word of mouth. Because if I'm loving it here and I'm telling my friends, I'm telling my family, we talked about recruitment methods. Unofficial word of mouth, I think, is a fundamental one that will come out of inclusion. And apart from all these strategies that people are employing, which are great, the one that we've not really covered is that word of mouth. If I'm happy, I'm going to tell everyone I'm happy, and other people are going to just want to come.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Absolutely.
I think that would be my thing. It'll have positive impact on staff morale, productivity, extensive business benefits, because as I said before, that's when sparks really fly in a positive way and give you results you never would have dreamed of when you get those true, diverse, inclusive teams working together.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you, Kavinda, for that and sharing your truly valuable insights and experiences with us today. I mean, your journey and vision for the future in the nuclear industry is inspiring. I've really, really enjoyed listening to you, and I appreciate your time and this thoughtful discussion as well.
Thanks a lot, Jade. It's been a privilege to talk to you. Thanks a lot for your time.
So to our viewers, thank you for joining us for this episode of Leadership Lens. We hope you found it as insightful as we did. Stay tuned for more episodes where we continue to explore and champion diversity and inclusion across various public sectors. Goodbye and see you next time.